Alright, have you ever been addicted to drugs? Have you ever been addicted to drugs? Have you ever been addicted to drugs?
Yeah, once.
Yes.
What kind of drugs you been addicted to?
Every drug.
Whenever I would see a homeless person on drugs or see people coming in and out of rehab, I would see the destruction it would cause the environment around them as well as themselves, and I would ask myself then, how could you do this to yourself? Where is your self-discipline? Your self-respect? How could you let yourself stoop so low to the point of where you're ignorant of your situation? Of course, the problem here was that I said all of this while being ignorant to the situations and problems these people are also facing. No more hypocrisy from me. Time to truly understand.
Alright, Ronnie, so the question is, have you ever been addicted to drugs?
Yes, I have.
What kind of drugs have you been addicted to?
Heroin.
Heroin?
Yeah, but I've been clean for 2 years now.
2 years?
Yep.
And how did that start? How did you get addicted to drugs?
I was actually over at the mission. I couldn't drink, and I got into the other things, and other things weren't working, and I ended up slipping off into that, and I ended up ODing 16 times.
The truth of addiction lies on wanting to escape the reality you're in. From trauma to working at a job you hate, from getting bullied and even the neglect parents give to their children, and the list can go way deeper. When you live in such a negative state of mind, you do anything, even literally throw your own life away to escape the present moment. Once you get hooked and try to pull away, the withdrawals are even worse than the initial feelings you had prior to taking any substances, which result in very few breaking away from the cycle. Of course, not everybody will take the hardcore drugs, and most will only stick to the basic weed and LSDs, which I believe to be harmless in moderation. Once you find yourself fitting for some more day in and day out, I would say it would be safer to pull back and evaluate. Risky game to be played, and honestly, I recommend to not play at all.
And why'd you start?
Just grew up in the streets around it, being influenced by it.
And how old were you when you first started using substances or alcohol?
In my teenage year, I was about 19. As far back as I can remember, I was about 19.
Have you always lived here in Peoria?
No, I've been around all over Illinois, the state of Iowa, and the state of Indiana, and the state of St. Louis, but I always come back here because I grew up mostly here.
Okay. And have you ever tried to pull away from substances, like try to become sober, but it was hard to do so?
Yes, that's why I travel from city to city, from state to state, running from an addiction.
The impact the environment you grew up in can cause serious damage or be your greatest blessing. I curiously asked Danny if he thinks addiction is a choice, and he responded with it being a choice passed down from generation to generation, more so a generational choice, and it was nice seeing him not take the victim route despite his circumstances. Danny wasn't the most fortunate in his upbringing, and I've seen firsthand the strength of peer pressure and sadly have witnessed many succumb to it. From bouncing from state to state to run from addiction, I regret not telling Danny to instead stand up and confront the drug-abusing shadow that is a part of him and that will continue to follow him regardless the state he's in. A misconception I had earlier is that drug addicts aren't the cleverest, and only if they were smart enough they would have had the wisdom to not continue the cycle of drug abuse. A stupid thought from me to say the least, as it looks like he's clearly aware of it.
So what was the first drug you ever took? Was it like weed or what was it?
Marijuana, weed.
And what age did you start?
4.
At 4 years old. And what got you into it?
My mother and father gave me and my sister on Halloween back in 1987. I'm at a joint, backseat like them, smoking. We 4 deep. It's Halloween and smoking a joint.
The saying of every child deserves a parent, but not every parent deserves a child can be proven through countless examples, with this unfortunately being one of them. Now, I'm not an expert on drug abuse and the harm it does to children, but I'm pretty sure giving a 4-year-old a blunt isn't the healthiest thing you can do for a child. He didn't seem to have a problem with explaining his story to me, and I even got the sense from his demeanor that he was surprised that I was taken aback. Despite this, Fredrick believes the answer for solving addiction is to turn introspective, which is what I wasn't expecting. Throughout these interviews, not one of them answered to solving addiction by taking a vaccine or creating a medical phenomenon that would completely eliminate all urges. Instead of this, they all took a more fearless approach and said the cure is to turn to yourself or to a more powerful deity that can help rise the helpless. I found this incredibly interesting because Judith Grisel, neuroscientist, former addict, and author of Never Enough, the book that inspired this video, said something similar in terms of there being no possible medical cure for addiction for the foreseeable future, but instead coming down to generational choices that again circles back to what Danny Lewis proclaimed. I must admit, I was a bit bewildered when he said that, because what exactly does a generational choice really even mean? Well, it stems down to the biological fact that exposure to drugs of abuse in our parents and grandparents predisposes us to take drugs ourselves, effectively a B process across generations. In other words, the actions you are doing now will not only affect you in that very moment or in the foreseeable future, but it will continue to follow you like a shadow until it's passed on to your children, thus recreating the generational cycle of drug abuse until the end of time, or until there is that one person willing to be strong enough to pull themselves free from the generational curses preceding their existence. I came into this not really knowing what to expect. A part of me was anxious that I was right, and that drug addicts are just incompetent zombies looking for an easy handout that would get them just enough to get another fix in. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are people like that, but from these 4 random men I interviewed, I got nothing from them but hope for another day, regret and sorrow of the mistakes they've made and the youth they wasted, and it really changed my perspective of them. The once so judgmental eye that would pierce through them is now one of understanding and wanting to help. To steal one more line from Judith's book, not a fact or a statistic this time, but a quote that unknowingly struck me. Instead of wringing our hands, we might try reaching for another's.